quite the talent he is. Proper chatterbox yada. If you're keen, it'll be brilliant. Today, we're going to keep it simple. I'll bark out a basic command and you watch. Keen to know? He'll set your tail wagging. Does mine, hence why I'm backing him. Right then, Wookie here. Do take a seat, won't you? Give us your full attention while we listen to my pal, Yada.
Welcome to this, the 7th edition of our basic series on Shabuwah, which is the promise of 7. Well, we always appreciate Wookie's endorsement. In this particular show, Wookie may be a bit under the weather. You see, we're having inclement conditions here in the U.S. Virgin Islands. It is freezing cold by our standards. Temperatures have dropped into the mid-70s with blowing rain, and it's supposed to continue to rain until such time as we'll need an ark sometime, maybe this coming weekend. Every day it's supposed to pour. And my friend Wookie here, he thinks that when the thunder answers the lightning, that God must be mad at him, and he runs for cover. So we will press on even under the conditions. The last time we enjoined our pursuit of developing a comprehensive understanding of Shabuwah, we were considering something Moshe had to say. And what I want to convey to you is that even though this series is called Basics, there are some subjects that we will go well beneath the surface and well beyond what would be considered a basic understanding, because it is something that is so essential to people's understanding and so pertinent to our situation in the here and now. Shabuwah is one of those things. And this is because Shabuwah represents a number of key concepts. The first is that Shabuwah begins the time of Israel's troubles. Now, it would appear that Israel is really mired in a very difficult spot now, with the whole world having turned against the Jewish state, and with 2 wars, maybe 3 wars, correctly assessed, progressing concurrently, and being abandoned basically by the United States now. Israel's in a really vulnerable position. And so God wants us to know, and he has stated this from a long, long time ago, that 7 years, Shabuwah, before his return in year 6,000 Yah with our Messiah, David, that Israel would endure a time of hellish troubles, worse than any period in the nation's history. And that period begins on this coming Shabuwah, less than 40 days from now, on the 22nd of May, 2026. So Shabuwah is the beginning of the 7 years of Jacob's troubles. And it also represents a katsir, a harvest. This is something that is near and dear to Yahweh. This katsir harvest was facilitated by the sacrifice that Dod performed by fulfilling Pesach, Matzah, and Bikurim in year 4,000 Yah, almost 2,000 years ago, when he opened the door to life, removed our guilt, carrying it into Sheol to deposit it there so we would be perceived as innocent before God, and enabled us to be adopted into the covenant family on Bikurim. This is the purpose of Pesach, Matzah, and Bikurim. And as I say, they were all fulfilled in year 4,000 Yah, 33 CE, as Dod professed in his prophetic accounts of these dates, so that we would be able to benefit from the Shabuwah harvest now. And whether that harvest takes place in 40 days, which I think is unlikely, or in a far more likely scenario, just 14 months from now. On the Shabbat of June 11th, 2027. This harvest is an essential part of God's story. And there are so many who are listening to these programs who wonder whether or not they will be included in the harvest. And God has a number of criterion, and by going through the Shabuwah harvest in some detail, we will discuss many of them. But they all really boil down to some basics, if you will. The first is we must know and use Yahweh's name. Second, we must know and appreciate his beloved Son and his Son's contribution to our inclusion in the covenant, and thus participation in Shabuwah. Third, we must have an understanding of and then accept the 5 conditions of the covenant, which are to disassociate from Babel, the integration of religion and politics, the half-truths that so permeate human society, walking away from religion and politics, as well as cultural human entanglements. We are also to distance ourselves from the family of man, preferring instead to be set apart unto the family of God. This is the first condition, even a prerequisite of the covenant. God asks us to walk to him and allow him to perfect us, to finish the job of making us appear innocent in his eyes. This occurs when we accept what Dowd has accomplished, empowered by Yahweh, enabled by Yahweh, in fulfilling Pesach, Matzah, and Bikurim, again in 33 CE. And we can walk all the way into God's presence by following the Moed Mikre, something that religion has either eliminated or corrupted to the point of no longer having any value and only having meaning to those who have read and benefited from the depictions that are presented in the Yada Yahweh library. Third is that we are encouraged to trust and rely on Yahweh, as opposed to any human institution, particularly religious and political ones, or even our military. We need to recognize that Yahweh is the only one who is trustworthy, and that to benefit from what he is offering, we must rely on him exclusively and on no one else. The fourth condition to participate in the covenant is to be observant, to closely examine and carefully consider all God has to say, not only about his covenant, but also about the Moed Mikre, these invitations to be called out and meet with God that enable the benefits. And fifth, to participate in the covenant, and therefore to enjoin the benefits of the Shabuwah harvest, one must be circumcised as a male, and we are asked as parents to circumcise our sons on the 8th day, raising them to be cognizant of the very conditions of this covenant. And of course, we must know that these conditions are met by accepting the intent of the Moedim, which is the next requirement to be in God's company, to accept the invitation he has offered to us through Pesach, opening the doorway to life, Matzah, carrying our guilt away and never to be seen again, Bikurim, enabling us to be adopted into his family, enriched and empowered by him, Shabuwah, to be further enriched and enabled so that we can serve during the millennial Shabbat. This is the purpose of Pesach, Matzah, Bikurim, and then Shabuwah, leading to Teruah, which is the greatest day on record, the greatest show on earth, if you will, where so many things transpire, but it's essential that you know what these are, in the sense that there will be a complete eradication of all of those who are religious and political. There will be a transformation back into the conditions of Eden for the entire earth. There will be a sacrifice of the Adam of Parah that purges the guilt of the remaining remnant of Israel. Also that we can participate in the great homecoming on Kippurim, where our Messiah and Savior, King Daud, returns with Yahweh. And this will enable 1,000 years to celebrate our return to Eden on Sukkah. This is the path that God has provided. But beyond all of this, and those are 4 important considerations, Yahweh's name, 5, Yahweh's name, his son's accomplishments on our behalf, the conditions of the covenant, and attendance at the Moedim, we are encouraged to be observant, to be responsive, to be thoughtful, and to be reliable, such that we demonstrate to God that we are appropriate to enable and enhance and empower in this way. You see, on Shabuwah, there is no turning back for God. He must be assured that those who receive this upgrade from 3 dimensions to 4, 5, 6, and 7 with an infinity as an increase all the way along that process, that our enablement, our emancipation, our empowerment, our enrichment is so extreme and forever that God has to be assured that we will be responsive, we will be observant, that we will be good collaborators, and be reliable, so that he can trust us with all of this immense freedom and power. And so for all of you who wish to participate in this, my encouragement to you would be that you not be focused upon your own salvation, if we were to use that term, but instead meeting and exceeding God's expectations, so that you, across that full spectrum of things that we have just discussed, you show that you are observant, thoughtful, responsive, and reliable. By engaging and doing the kinds of things that he wants done, contributing to others will get you in very good stead with God. So this is what Moshe added regarding Shabuwah. He said, you, masculine singular, should consistently recount the written documentation communicated on how to relate to. He wants us to narrate and enumerate the words in the book and quantify, explain, and inform about them in writing regarding the record of the promise of 7. Sheba, for Shabuwah. 7s as the Shabbat, as it pertains to you, masculine singular, beginning from the wounding and dishonoring by besmirching, by the piercing and dishonoring, as a sickle is used to split and ban, attempting to divide and destroy ha-kama, the standing grain, that which is upright and firmly rooted, from kum, to stand upright and to rise, to be ratified, confirmed and established, then raised. Your, again, masculine singular, you, I should say, should begin once defamed and dishonored. You should initiate the process cutting to the chase when pierced and wounded, to vividly, dramatically, and consistently recount the written record, boldly enumerating, both vocally and in writing, the countdown towards the promise of 7 Shabbats. Sheba, Shabuwah. That is from Dabarim. Words should never have been called. Deuteronomy 16:9. I can promise you that that is very different than what other translations and translators have conveyed, even what I had previously understood. And this is because the primary, the secondary, and even the tertiary definitions of Cha'al are to defame and to defame, I should say, to dishonor. And Chermesh is to divide and attempt to destroy. So they are, as I recited them in this translation, which you were able to read right alongside of my presentation of them. And as such, this is prophetic of exactly what occurred with us some 18 months ago, right down to the very letter and nuance. It's every implication. You see, it was only once an attempt was made to divide us by defaming me that our countdown to Shabuwah actually began. Having previously been focused on all of the marvelous things which are going to transpire on Teruah, which, quite frankly, is a bigger day, but with a more comprehensive purpose. And also to have an appreciation that it is Shabuwah that makes Teruah possible. Because without Shabuwah, there wouldn't be the team in place to facilitate what needs to be done. So a little explanation might be in order here. Prior to maybe now 2 years ago, approximately that time, I had thought that the next harvest was Teruah. And indeed, Teruah is an upcoming harvest. The reason for that is that there is so much discussion about Shabuwah having been fulfilled after Pesach, Matzah, and Bikurim, albeit in the New Testament. The fact is that the New Testament is a counterfeit of reality. In other words, everything in the New Testament, not everything, but the preponderance of what you read in the New Testament about the caricature known as Jesus is a ripoff of what Dode actually did and what was said about Dode. And so there was a crucifixion, and it happened on Passover, and there was a journey into hell. It happened on Matzah, and there was a restoration from hell back to the Father. It happened on Bikurim. And that it was Dode's Bashar body on Passover and Nefesh soul on the other 2 dates that enabled the desirable result. And that the Messiah and Son of God and Savior, our former and returning King, is Dode, not the mythical Jesus. And so with all the fuss over Shabuwah, there was the natural inclination to say that, well, maybe it was Dode that somehow fulfilled it, offering the promise of 7 going forward. But it wasn't. And as I repudiated the 2nd chapter of Luke, absolutely destroying every nuance of it, I came to realize that this was Satan's doing to confiscate Shabuwah as if it were the one and only Moed Mikre that was attributable to this new religion. And of course, without Pesach, Matzah, and Bikurim, Shabuwah is meaningless. It is a Bikurim harvest, and Bikurim is the result of Pesach and Matzah. So it makes sense that it could not have been that way, since there is no association with the death of the man god on Passover with what transpired on Matzah, because the man god was taking a nap on the Shabbat, as opposed to taking our guilt into Sheol. And the next day, rather than a celebration of firstborn children of Bikurim, the Christian myth goes back to Babylon and celebrates Easter Sunday. So it made no sense to associate Shabuwah with Pentecost or with something that had been fulfilled. And then, of course, there was a realization that Bikurim is a barley harvest that takes place at that time, and that Shabuwah is a wheat harvest, and that clearly it has not yet occurred. And when you read Isaiah 17, it's obvious, based upon the text, that the Shabuwah harvest is associated with the slimming of Yisrael at the waist, which would be to create a Fakistinian state of terror, and give it to the Muslims as a form of appeasement. And while we are not quite there yet, there have been so many plans laid toward that eventuality, and it is something that literally now could happen in the blink of an eye, based upon the vulnerability of Israel after this most recent ill-conceived war with Iran, and after the devastation of Gaza as a response to 10/7 of 23. And so this is a future event. The state of Islamic terrorism has not yet been carved out of Israel. And therefore, we are not ready for the Shabuwah harvest until that occurs. I'm expecting that to occur sometime over the next 14 months, between now and June 11th of 2027, with a realization that we are already well into the time of trouble. And so its official commencement at 22 May of 2026 obviously is inevitable. Therefore, we came to realize that Shabuwah was the next harvest. But the catalyst for doing so was an upwelling of not only insecurity, but selfishness among those who had previously claimed to be covenant. They wanted the Miriam experience. They wanted to claim that they too spoke for God. And since there was no sanction for anyone else other than the Choder and Nakri, the Zeroah, the Bashar, the Crag, speaking for Yahweh as Yata and writing Yada Yahweh now, they created the myth of a mommy god. So we referred to him as the mother goddess Kotlet. And they pursued this myth so that they were in service to Mother God. Mother God doesn't have a speaking role. And so since Mother God never speaks, they could write whatever they wanted into their role. It's like the rabbis. God says nothing about eating kosher, so they made it all up and explained that their Talmud was necessary because God doesn't address eating kosher, because of course God doesn't want us to eat kosher. And God doesn't ever speak as a mommy goddess because, well, God's persona is masculine. He always conveys himself as singular and masculine, not as a duality and not as a hermaphrodite. But it was during this period that the malcontents were not only defaming of me because, well, they couldn't write a story about themselves without disparaging everything they had learned from me over the previous 20 some odd years. So they had to disparage me to carve out new turf for themselves. That's why Miriam disparaged Moshe via his wife, and they did the same to my wife, using her as leverage to attack me. Same exact story. Of course, God responded to Miriam as an example to this mother goddess cult by saying, no, you don't. When I choose someone to speak for me, they know it, and you should know it because I've made it clear. And by claiming authority for yourselves when it is not yours to have, consider yourself stricken with leprosy, considering you spit in the face, consider yourself sent out of this community, never to be part of it again. And there are prophecy after prophecy regarding this, including the realization that when Yahweh tells us about the disappearance of those who are harvested on Shabuwah, that there will be a group of people questioning why they have gone, who will be sent off to Sheol, hell. And so it was in this cauldron of malfeasance and malignancy that we began to recalibrate the timing and purpose of Shabuwah, just as Moshe wrote 3,450 years ago. So it is when we began to recount the written documentation communicated on how to relate to the promise of 7 for Shabuwah as it pertains to us, beginning from the moment that we were wounded, besmirched, and dishonored. Just as the sickle was used to split apart and ban, attempting to divide and destroy the Kama, the standing grain. You should begin once defamed and dishonored to vividly, dramatically, and consistently recount this written record, boldly enumerating, both vocally and in writing, the countdown towards the promise of 7 Shabbats. Now, go to yadayah.com, click on time. The first thing you'll see on the top is 4 countdown timers. The first is to the beginning of the time of Yisrael's troubles, less than 40 days from now. The second you'll find is the countdown to the Shabuwah harvest, some 14 months from now. The third is to the end of the time of troubles and the greatest show on earth on Yom Teruah, a little over 7 years from now. And then following that, to Yahweh's return, a countdown of exactly to the second, when we expect Yahweh to return with our Messiah and King and Savior, Dowd. So that's quite an insight, prophetically telling us things that, well, we just would not otherwise have known. There were, of course, 6 days to creation. And then on the 7th, Yahweh reflected upon and blessed what he had achieved. Mankind's experience outside of the Garden of Eden will last 6,000 years before we're allowed to return to Eden and enjoy it during the 7th millennium. We're invited to walk with God along 6 steps that he has provided so that we can celebrate our relationship with him during the 7th, being Sukkah. The universe is 6-dimensional with the 3 dimensions of space plus time, separation and attraction, with its creator living in the 7th dimension where we are being invited. Humankind conceived in God's image on the sixth day as a carbon-based life form with the atomic number of 6, in addition to, Yahweh, who is one, is the perfect result expressed by 7. In addition to Yahweh, who is one, we know that, that the final witness to the Moedim, and in collaboration with Dode, they will fulfill each of these 7 Moedim. And that Yahweh's Choder, Yada, has been given the benefit of 7 spirits, enabling him to comprise his Neph sign and banner. And even with those 7 spirits, 6 are distinct from the 7th, and that the 7th is simply stated and profoundly described as the spirit of Yahweh. The other 6 enable attributes. Now, these things known, Shafar, recounting and enumerating Yahweh's written testimony through his Nabi prophets, is actually essential to our well-being. This is why we have delineated the dates for everything important to Yahweh and to ourselves. And we will be the beneficiaries when they're all fulfilled. We have provided a comprehensive timeline of events from being ousted from the garden to our return. And we have boldly announced to the exact moment on the precise day when Shabuwah, Teruah, Kippurim, and Sukkah will come to pass just as they are promised. Yahweh provided his explanations and this information. We have a toe biter again. As he has promised. And God provided this throughout his prophets. And we have enumerated everything that can be known about these things so that no one is left unaware. By starting the countdown to our observance of Shabuwah, keyed off of the Bikurim ingathering, we discovered that Shabuwah as a harvest isn't an isolated affair. The path to God is straightforward, one step following another. The 7 Mikre work in harmony as cohesive components of the whole, accomplishing a singular purpose, bringing man back in contact with God. And in this regard, the initial 2 Moedim, eternal witnesses to the restoring testimony, Pesach and Matzah, prepare us for the 3 Katsir harvests, which follow, Bikurim, Shabuwah, and Teruah. Harvests of barley, varieties of wheat, and then of olives. They lead to the final 2 Mikre, invitations to be called out and meet, known as Kippurim and Sukkah, where we capitalize on what Father and Son have achieved and are offering and celebrate their return, homecoming, and wedding. This reads, when you, again masculine singular, then you should act upon and engage in Asha, you should attend to and celebrate, participating in at this moment, the festival feast, the Chag, the great celebration and party of Shabuwah, of 7s, Shabbats, weeks, and promises, to approach Yahweh, your God, by passing the test, proving one's worth with an appropriate response after examination, being sufficient while measuring up, Misa, doing everything that such that it's in the right proportion, such that it is enough, overcoming challenges and enduring this trial. Voluntarily offering this, doing so freely, willingly, and in abundance, not a free will contribution, a non-compulsory donation, demonstrating of one's own inclinations to do so voluntarily and readily out of abundance. From nada, to show your willingness of your masculine singular hand, which to demonstrate the way to the benefits of the relationship you, again, masculine singular, can actually and consistently give, you are able to genuinely bestow, continually offer, call imperfect, second person, masculine singular again, when compared to how in this relationship of Yahweh, your God continues to bless and adore you, masculine singular, kneels down and favors you, uplifting you while bequeathing you with greatness. Dabarim words should never have been called Deuteronomy 16:10. This morning I was asked to contribute to a question by someone who has been with us for a very long time, has listened to so many programs, and it was a genuinely thoughtful request, but I think a bit misguided. And while my answer hasn't been shared with anyone other than the person to whom this question was asked, what I shared with them is that we have to be really careful when inquiring about whether or not we individually are going to be part of this harvest or not. What I have said previously is that there are a number of things that are asked of us. Know and use Yahweh's name. Have an appreciation for what God's firstborn son, Dod, has achieved on our behalf. God's going to ask this of us. To accept the 5 conditions of the covenant and to know they are bequeathed on our behalf through the Moedim, the appointments of the restoring witnesses. And that we have learned so much about what went wrong in Eden and have learned what God is seeking from those that he is comfortable of enabling beyond the 3 dimensions that we enjoy here on earth, with such enormous power and opportunity being granted to us, that he expects us to be observant, which is one of the conditions of the covenant, to be thoughtful, which I see as another, in that Shamar speaks of closely examining and carefully considering. Us being responsive, and that God wants us to engage in the work of the covenant, of the family, engage in the family business, and to be reliable, so that when we make a mistake, we learn from it, so that when we trip and fall, we get back up and prove to God that we are resilient, that we are responsible, so that he's comfortable empowering, enriching, and liberating us to the extent of the 4th, 5th, 6th, and 7th dimensions. So with those things known, I think that the best answer to who's going to be part of it is to break that down really into 2 concepts. One is we're told specifically about 8 people. That's not the limit of those who will be harvested. It's just that there are 8 specific individuals who are quantified here on Shabuwah, again on Teruah, and on Kippurim, that are a cast of characters that comprise a team of people, of leaders, of elders, if you were, of the most mature and engaged, most passionate contributors to what Yahweh once accomplished. They're not, harvest is not limited to them, but it is focused on them. Because God wants those people to go on a working vacation, to empower and enrich them all the more so that they can be particularly effective over the next 1,000 years. And so, with that being the focus of God's intent, all of us would be wise to act accordingly. To say, yeah, I want to be one of those who is viewed as a major contributor. And so the more you look outside of yourself as to what you have to offer and what you contribute, the less you have to be concerned about whether or not you make the cut. Understand? And you can create a self-fulfilling prophecy, if you will. You excel on each of those things that we discussed previously, and you won't even have to give it a second thought, will you? In fact, you'll go beyond being concerned whether or not you make the cut to being ecstatic that you are among those perceived as doing something that pleases our God, and that many will benefit forevermore because of what you've accomplished on their behalf. Now, this statement from the Torah, I think, does a marvelous job of explaining that. So I'm going to read it again, and we're going to talk about it as we move through it. So it says, then you should act upon and engage in. This is something you have to do. God's not giving the covenant away. You have to earn it. He's asking you to work, to act, to engage, to attend to business, to participate in the festival feast. Participate in the festival feast doesn't mean take me. It means I'm contributing to it. I'm increasing the harvest. I'm celebrating not my own inclusion, but the fact that I've contributed to the inclusion of others. I've made the entire experience of forevermore more enriching and enjoyable and edifying for everyone by increasing the quality of the participants and perhaps even the quantity of them. So you should act and engage in. You should attend to and celebrate, participate in at this time the festival feast, the celebration, the party of Shabuwah. So when you do this, the first idea that pops in your head should be, this is not an ordeal. This isn't some laborious burden. This isn't a religious exercise. What you're doing is fun. If it isn't fun, stop doing it. You're doing it the wrong way. If you're fretting over it, not so good. It's a party. Yeah, I've thrown lots of parties. I've attended lots of parties. And I can tell you that when you contribute to the party in some way, through your personality, through the things that you have brought in terms of food and drink, accoutrements, the people you've invited, the conversation you've enjoyed, any of those things, they're fun. Even for an introvert, they're fun. So engage in, do the work of. And work is not a pejorative with God. The things associated with the celebration of Shabuwah. To approach Yahweh, your God. And then this this great word, one of the most, I think, revealing, inspiring, educational words you're likely to ever see in association with an event like Shabuwah. And it is Misha. And it means to pass the test, to prove one's worth. You know, I don't know about most people. I've passed a lot of tests. I earned my private pilot's certificate. I earned a instrument certificate on airplanes to fly in IMC conditions. I have earned a commercial pilot's license. I've gone all the way to earning a twin engine airline transport pilot certificate, the highest you can have. I've earned single pilot status in jets. I've been certified as a scuba diver. I've passed tests to be qualified to captain large yachts. I have passed tests to enter college and to go to schools that would not have me otherwise. I've passed many, many tests in business. Life is about passing tests. Achievement is about passing tests. And we shouldn't ever think that once we have passed our last scholastic test and been graded upon it, that is the last test in life. Raising children is a test. Marriage is a test. Contributing to the Torah is a test. Observing the Torah is a test. Look at Abraham. He was tested on whether or not he would contribute at all, would listen to God and do as he had asked, pursuant to the covenant. The episode of the dress rehearsal on Mount Moriah was a test where he had a chance to prove his worth. And we're demonstrating to God that we're worthy of his attention. Misha, with an appropriate response. Listen, I work for God every day, anywhere from 12 to 14 hours a day, 7 days a week. This is what I do. And I've been doing it now for a quarter of a century, as well as 100,000 hours. It's not hard. It isn't something that is draining. Instead, it's invigorating, it's inspiring, it's uplifting. And I only have to go so far because God meets me more than halfway. I show the effort. Very often he delivers the results. So we're tasked with an appropriate response. My response to what God has asked of me is much greater than yours. You're listening to this program. The only person who was tasked with a greater responsibility was Dode. He may be listening, but if it is, he's chuckling at our present situation. But the fact is, there is an appropriate response for all of us. I don't know what yours is, but you're in a better position to determine that than anyone else. And that once you have determined an appropriate response, and listen, God's not going to do the same thing as somebody who says, I want you to tell me what the appropriate response. If you can't read the Torah, prophets, and so on, you can't read yada yada and know what God's looking for, then no one's going to help you. There is no answer man for this. You need to be well enough appraised of what God is trying to achieve in these 6,000 years to know what he wants. So what's appropriate is not figuring out what God wants. It's not making yourself all that unique. It's just fitting in. Doing something that is appropriate for you within the framework of what God has delineated. And so After examination, you can be seen as sufficient, having measured up, having done enough. Everything in the right proportion, overcoming the challenges and enduring this trial. Life is a trial. Every aspect of it is a trial. Families, businesses, even learning, contributing. Boy, I'll tell you what, covenant's a trial. We've really gone through some nasty people and determining who doesn't belong. And so God says, do this on your own initiative. It's got to be voluntary. Doing so freely, willingly, and preferably in abundance as a free will contribution of your hand, of your influence. Listen, you can be a keyboard contributor. You don't have to leave your house. Learn and then share. Lots of ways to do it. Which to demonstrate the way to benefit from the relationship, you can actually and considerably give. Give what you can give. Don't just take. Give. Contribute. And God says, do so. Compared to how, in this relationship with Yahweh, your God continues to bless and adore you. That's the rub of the whole thing. I might make a statement that, I've contributed 100,000 hours. I've written 35 books. I've written more than all of the other prophets and witnesses combined. And I've done now tens of thousands of audio programs. And I'm here to tell you that while that is a lot to contribute, God has given me far more than I have given him. No comparison. And he will do the same with you. It's like I've got a garden trowel, and he is using a mining caliber excavator, where there's like a few trillion scoops, and one scoop from his. So God has said it so many times that, of course, it bears repeating. We must Esha. We must engage if we want to profit from the Mikra. God expects us to work. Man was conceived to work. If you think that Shabuwah is a vacation, then you're perceiving it completely wrong. It's a time for us to be empowered so that we can be more effective contributors. And it's our actions that ultimately determine whether or not we are considered participants and contributors. How's that for an answer? Any questions, fellas?
Very good.
We have Perry at the controls under the watchful eye of Rich today, so that both are capable of being king and prince of the cables. And so we are being run by Perry today during this presentation of the 7th episode of Basics on Shabuwah. See, we are demonstrating, serving as examples. Even Wookiee here is dog on duty of what God is asking of us. Now, as I say, you are not called to be me. You don't want to be called to be me. You aren't called to be Dode. There is no line here that God says, pick up your goddamn cross and follow me. No. He's not asking you to die for him. He's not asking you to give money to him. He's not asking you to bow down and worship him. He is not asking you to pray to him. He is asking you to be observant, be thoughtful, to be responsive, and to demonstrate that you can be reliable, because he wants you to engage with him. So, as is the case with unyeasted bread, 7 sevens is a chog. It's a celebration of the relationship. It is our opportunity to approach Yahweh, knowing Yahweh. You, again, masculine singular, can genuinely rejoice and be glad at this moment. Well, the reason I'm saying masculine singular all the way through is that there are 2 different yous in Hebrew. There is, and a verb can be written in second person masculine, plural, or masculine, feminine, plural, or singular. And sometimes I think it's just appropriate to know that when God is addressing Shabuwah, he's addressing you individually, me individually, in terms of our responsibility. So I'm reading this as, this is my responsibility. This is what Yahweh wants me to do for you. But as is the case with everything God says, what applies to me can also apply to you to a very large extent. I mean, you're not going to go and be the Adam of Parah. You're not the man from Edom. But you can do so much of what God is asking. You can apply so much of what he says to yourself. Even things that Yahweh is deliberately writing on behalf of his firstborn Dode. I'll apply to me too. Why? Because if God wants it of Dode, I know that he is consistent and would like it from all of us. And so I'm sharing this that way so that you know, this is, when it comes to things like a harvest of this nature where you're empowered tenfold, and a double portion of a tenfold enhancement and enrichment, that it's between you and God. So you, singular, can genuinely rejoice and be glad in this moment. You should be pleased, should be happy. Now, because of the fact I am reading this pursuant to the responsibility that I've been assigned, because clearly the beginning of this was prophetic of our particular situation at this particular time. And I was called as the final Zeroah to enable the harvest of Shabuwah and Teruah, and to serve as the sacrifice on Teruah. So it's not inappropriate for me to take it personally. But when I do that, what I read is, in spite of all my limitations, in spite of being probably a billionth as bad as the malcontents have painted me, we're celebrating. God's telling me and telling you, if you're contributing to us, part of this team, that we ought to be pleased. We ought to be thrilled with what we have achieved in the very presence of Yahweh, our God. This is not just me, of course, but here are those 8 individuals. And again, don't mistake the fact that there are 8 very significant people that God is calling out as it pertains to Shabuwah and the entire invitees of Shabuwah. They're much, much greater than the 8. But there are 8 people that God says, I want you to be contemplating if you are one of these 8 people, so that you have some appreciation of the responsibility and opportunity that you have in this regard. So I want you, which means that I am not part of this 8, and your, number 1, son. I have a earthly son, mortal son. And I have fathership over God's son. Not until quite recently, although I've served in that role previously. But one son, two, daughter. Your, again, masculine singular, number three, male, masculine, coworker, man that works with you. And four, Amma, productive mother. I'd say that spot's pretty much filled. And the five, the Lowe uniter, the one who joins us together, who, for the benefit of the relationship, is in your, again, masculine singular, community, who's beneficially within your gates and assemblies. And six, a gur, a foreigner, who remains living with you on this journey, a sojourner from a different racial, geographic, or national group among you from Gur, the one on a journey to live and to remain. Number seven, an orphan, someone who is lonely, the fatherless and motherless who is isolated. And eight, a strong widow, an almanah, the forsaken whose spouse is gone, but yet is quite strong nonetheless. Now, wanting to be led on the correct and beneficial path in your, again, masculine singular, midst and physical presence, standing up at the place, which to show the way to receive the benefits of the relationship, Yahweh your God chooses for his personal and proper name to dwell, to reside, and to settle down and remain. Shakan. Devarim words should never have been called Deuteronomy 16:11. So there's been a lot of interest in who these eight would be, in addition to the one identified as you, masculine singular. And I might speculate a guess here, but the fact is I'm not responsible for choosing them. And it's very possible that there are a number of people, all that qualify under each of these designations, and that the designation of the eight isn't something you should ascribe to unless you want to spend the next 1,000 years with the burden, and it is a burden, of designated responsibility. Your son? Well, in this story, my son is God's son, Dod. My daughter is the feminine Bereth, the covenant. Your coworker, I would think that Elia is a possibility, but if we want to get more specific, because Elia is obviously part of the prophet's going to play a very important role going forward just because of his prophetic acumen, then of course it would be my pal Rich, who's come here to live and become family, my brother. He is the ultimate coworker. Your Amma, as I said, that role is taken. Don't worry about being, late in line as if somebody else might have been in that position. Leah and I began this relationship 5,400 years ago. So we've been there and done that. The uniter, of course, could be Moshe, but I think Moshe earns his credentials elsewhere. He doesn't get his credentials through Shabuwah. I think the uniter is the man who is so essential to kind of keeping everything together for us. And that's my co-host on the vlog on the blog, Kevin. The foreigner living with you, remaining on this journey, well, the guy that's just moved here that's been foreign to us, I didn't even really know him until a phone call a few months ago. Well, that would be the prince of the cables right now, Perry. But there are others that I have been engaged with on this journey. The earthly orphan on the proper path. Well, there are so many people who qualify under this. The closest to me that aren't celebrating, that I know don't have parents anymore. The likes of my pal Kirk, my long-term friend Dr. Jeff, are all examples of this, but there are many others. Even as we consider the transformative nature of such a remarkable young man, and Matt would fall under this category too, would he not? The strong widow wanting to be led doesn't mean that you're unmarried now, but have somebody who has experienced separation previously, but is a woman who found her home and her father in the Torah and in the covenant, who was eager to be led. There are, again, numbers of people who would qualify in this regard. And, I don't get much outside of the inner circle that I know and work with day to day. And so the person that comes to mind for me, of course, very quickly is Mariah. Because I know all that she does. I know that she's very happily married at the moment, but I don't know if it's her first marriage or not, whether or not this or just the fact that she is a strong woman wanting to be led and has found a husband, if you will, in the covenant and in the Torah. Anyway, this does not say that they are the total harvested, not by any stretch, nor imply that to be the case. It says that simply that I should be glad at this time before Yahweh for them. And I can tell you that we have a more congenial, capable, supportive, mutually beneficial team than any person could possibly want. We have 8 times 10 that are making enormous contributions at this point. And so I thank you for that. This also says that Yahweh is choosing the place and time regarding these people. But I will tell you that now the home for Yahweh's name, it's yadayah.com. And it's getting better every day. So there are many places actually of Yahweh's choosing, and they are all related. With Adam, who is Dod, it was Eden. With Noach, it was the ark, although Dod was there as well. With Abraham, it was the promised land. During the Yatzah Exodus, it was the tabernacle of the restoring witness. With Dod, it became Jerusalem. With Solomon, it became the temple. As a place, it is Moriah and Zion, Jerusalem, Yehudah, and Yisrael. But more than this, Yahweh's name belongs in his Torah, among his Nabiim, prophets, and with his Bereth, covenant, throughout his Mikra, invitations to be called out and meet, and inside of his Am family, particularly including Yehudim, where his name resides. When we are in one of these places, mentally or physically, we are in the midst of the place Yahweh has chosen for his name to reside and to remain. Today, and for the foreseeable future, I would contend that the home for Yahweh's name and his reputation is yadayah.com. Frankly, nothing comes close. Now, I find it particularly poignant that the passage culminates with a reference to standing up at the place where Yahweh your God chooses. Father and Son stood up for us on Mount Moriah, ultimately enabling us to stand with them, camping out together for all time. Also notice that Yahweh introduced the all-inclusive nature of this party with the phrase, rejoice and be glad. God's preference is to be happy and to be around elated individuals, not curmudgeons. I suspect that there is a little sign somewhere above those pearly gates that says, please, no sourpusses beyond this point. The only disability for which there is no cure is a bad attitude. And eternity is a long time to endure a bunch of killjoys. So apart from the persistent Islamic persecution of Christians and Jews, there are not many slaves currently in Egypt, although there are some 50 million worldwide today because of religion. And yet this message is universal because at one time or another, most of us have had our liberty constrained. Therefore, in the midst of the celebration, Yahweh would have us be mindful of what he has done to engender our freedom. He says, and this is a follow-on from Devarim words, now 16:12. At this moment, you should remember that as a memorable man, that indeed you were a co-worker, making a contribution, an associate and servant in Mitzrayim, in these crucibles of political and religious oppression, within the cauldrons of cruel persecution, where people are confined and restricted by military, economic, or other human institutions, or even during the time of Shar, of troubles. You should closely examine and carefully consider, and you should engage and act upon these prescribed inscriptions for living that allocate a share to those who are cut into this relationship. Devarim 16:12. So I continue to be convinced that Yahweh included the prophetic references to Eldod and Midod to affirm that, well, we were there, making a contribution to the health and the well-being of Moshe and to the children of Yisrael. Yahweh has no issue in picking a person at a particular time to communicate through. But if that person has to be both a conveyor and player, someone who is asked not only to speak for God, but to act for God, and an important role, he will almost always have someone there to support them. As he said in the beginning, it is not good for man to be alone. We don't do well alone. Now, the fact is, we don't do well in groups either. A gang man is vastly inferior to individual man, but individual man isn't worth a hoot unless properly supported. And so we weren't there to speak for God. Eldode and Mydode were there to support and to affirm and to uplift the one God had chosen at that time to speak for him. The Moed Mikre are clearly communicated written prescriptions for living. We should shamar, observe them, closely examining and carefully considering them, and then ashah, act upon what God has chokum, inscribed and prescribed. This approach will lead us to walk away from, to be released from Mitzrayim, the crucibles of human oppression, and to be emancipated in Shamaim, the spiritual realm. The Mikre are not to be replaced by ceremonies and rituals conceived by men and women. Those who observe Easter and Christmas, Rosh Hashanah and Hanukkah, All Hallows Eve and St. Valentine's Day, Ashura Day and Ramadan, the solstice or May Day, or any other man-made political and religious scheme, contribute to the deception and add to the fog which separates mankind from God. So 6 years, you should sow your land and gather in the produce thereof. Doesn't sound like God is saying, hey, don't need to work. We're into entitlements. We're going to do socialism, to each according to their need, from each according to their ability. Yeah, just sign up for food stamps. No, I didn't say that, did he? 6 years you should sow. Zerah, your land. And Ashaph, gather in the harvest, this produce thereof. But on the seventh, you should allow it to fall and lie fallow, freeing it, scattering and dispersing it for the purpose of future renewal. By fallow, God's not saying that you dig up everything so nothing grows. It's just that you don't harvest it so that others, animals and the like, can benefit from it. So those in need are willing to capitalize upon and the opportunity to take responsibility among your people. Maybe it may eat and be nourished, which is the point I'm making. And it doesn't say feed them. It doesn't say give them food stamps. It says you just don't harvest your land 1 year and 7 so that others can be nourished. They can go and do the work necessary to glean the crop and provide for themselves. Moreover, leave a remainder so that other living creatures of the open fields and the countryside may feed upon it. Do the same with your vineyards and your olive groves. Shemoth, names, Exodus 23:11. 6 days you should engage and do your work, accomplishing whatever you prefer. And on the 7th day, the day of promise, you should celebrate the Shabbat, actively engaging in the promise of 7, so that tasked with carrying out your burdens and your means of production, you can offer a break, becoming spiritually refreshed and restored. Then the children of your workers and visitors from different cultures and ethnicities without inherited rights may take a breather and be refreshed. I share this from Shemoth, names should not have been called Exodus 23:12, to show the correlation between Shabuwah and the Shabbat. It is a celebration of the Shabbat. We are taking a breather to be refreshed, but it isn't an end of our responsibilities. We're we are at this point cultivating the land for the benefit of others. In all things that benefit the relationship that I have shared with you, be observant. That is the first step we take towards God. Therefore, do not bring to mind by proclaiming in a memorable way the names of other gods, neither let them be heard from your mouth. This doesn't say that you can't condemn a false god like Hashem, Allah, Jesus. God does all the time. He leads by example in condemning false gods. What it says is that we should not proclaim them in a memorable way. 3 times you should be on your feet during the festival feasts to approach me each year. 3 times. There's 3 sets of Moedim, of these festival feasts. Chag Matzah, Shabuwah, and Chag Sukkah. The Chag celebration of matzah, unyeasted bread, you should observe, closely examining and carefully considering. 7 days you should actually and consistently eat bread without the embittering fungus and contentious nature of yeast. For those who don't know, Chef Perry is a spectacular matzah maker. And we continue to dine on matzah, and we are in the Hezekiah plan. If 1 week was good, 2 weeks are better. Although we may do it for a month. We just love matzah. Love what it symbolizes, and love matzah, the texture, the taste, and dipping it in the olive oil and bitter herbs is the ultimate snack. And it's a good accompaniment to every meal. So 7 days, or 7 more days, or 7 more days after that, you should actually consistently eat bread without the embittering fungus and contentious nature of yeast. Do so in a manner consistent with the way to receive the benefits of the relationship which I have instructed you to approach during the eternal witness to the appointed meetings, the Moedim. In the month of Abib, the first month of the year, during the beginning of spring, when barley is still green and growing. Indeed, in it, you were removed and came forth, delivered and withdrawn from Mitzrayim, the crucibles of political and religious oppression. Therefore, no one will appear before me without reason or cause, without what is expected, based upon what has been fulfilled. Shemot, names, 23:15. You should observe the festival feast of HaKatzir, the harvest, reaping what was sown and is ready to be gathered, of Bakurim, the firstborn children. Your undertaking and pursuits to make a connection and to show the benefits of the relationship you have sown, expecting these seeds to take root and grow and become a productive harvest. Throughout the region, along with the festival feast of the ingathering, of being received and rewarded, you are restored and renewed when you are gathered in, received, and accepted. And that indeed is the purpose. That which is associated with your actions and whatever you choose to pursue will lead to the realm where there is a sense of openness, of opportunity. Shemot 23:16. 3 times in the conduct of your life, demonstrating a pattern of behavior which is in the proper sequence during the year, all of you should remember to be seen before Yahweh. You should not offer the sacrifice of an animal you have prepared to consume in the proximity of yeasted bread, the invasive fungus which spoils, as well as the culture which intoxicates. The blood sacrificially shed and offered as a favor to reconcile, you should not allow to endure through the night. It is the bounty of my festival feast, which is an enduring witness come morning, and something to remember forever. It's the blood shed, both on Pesach and the blood that will be shed on Teruah. And the initial and best part of the first fruits, including firstborn children of your realm, you should come bringing them for the family and home of Yahweh your God. Don't come empty-handed. Bring others with you. Behold, I will send out a messenger, a representative who is especially informative and announcing this message before you, in your presence, and within the same dimension, to help keep you focused so that you become observant, closely examining and carefully considering everything along the way. In addition, he will provide you with directions that will bring you to the source, the very dwelling place, and the home, which to offer these benefits of the relationship, I have prepared. Shemoth, names, Exodus 23:20. There were moments along the way that we thought this messenger might be Moshe. Then at times he seemed to be Dowd. On other occasions, the Malach appeared to be a spiritual envoy, at least until such time as we recognized that he would be a herald during the last days. And now, well, the messenger is clear. Yahweh is calling and guiding his people home through our collaboration with his Malach. His message can be readily discerned and acted upon. You can engage based upon the library at Yada Yahweh. And so you should choose to closely examine and carefully consider this, becoming focused and observant, Shamar, regarding his appearance and his very presence. That would make him a person, not an invisible spiritual being, correct? Of your own volition, listen. Through his voice. Do not become rebellious against him, nor defiant toward him, neither embittered nor contentious, neither grieved nor bewildered, because otherwise he will not tolerate or endure your rebellion, your revolting defiance and revolting, repulsive deviations from the established message. And you may say that's unfair, but in a moment I'll tell you why it's not. This is because my personal and proper name is integrated within his inner nature. Yada, Yahweh. The very spirit of Yahweh is within him. The reason it's not inappropriate that Yahweh's chosen one, his Malach messenger, this Bashar herald, Yada, the one who knows, Yahweh's Nakri, observant foreigner, who is the recipient of his seven spirits as the Choder, and is now conducting and cultivating the final harvest as the Zeroah, is said to be intolerant, such that he will not put up with rebellion, nor defiance, nor deviations from the established message. Is because much is asked of him. He is being tasked with a job heretofore no one has completed. And it's the very least that God can do to ask him to do the near impossible, even with Yahweh's full support. But then to have him have to endure the company of those who have tried so hard to destroy his credibility, who have besmirched his wife, who have attacked him at every possible moment, would be grossly unfair. And God is never unfair. So you may not like the fact that I'm intolerant, that I'm bold, confident, and aggressive, or that I suffer fools poorly. But it is by Yahweh's design that it is so. So if you don't like it, you may need to rewrite the Torah. And I think that would be a very poor choice. Now, seldom, perhaps never, has there been anyone so resolutely focused on knowing, appreciating, speaking, and writing Yahweh's name. The 35 volumes are presented as Yada Yahweh, and in them, for the first time since Moshe revealed God's name 3,500 years ago, I have explained its meaning and how to properly pronounce it. So it is safe to say that Yahweh's personal and proper name is integrated within my very nature, within our collaboration together. Indeed, if you listen very carefully to his call voice and engage, acting upon everything that I say for the benefit of the relationship, then I will be openly hostile towards those who oppose you, demonstrating rancor towards your adversaries. I will, when required, besiege and defeat your foes, those who try to constrain you. And I can assure you, while they may be feeble and they may be few, they are exceedingly irritating and counterproductive. Yahweh knows their names, as do I. Surely, my Malach messenger will go before you so that he can help you return to what has been said, to everything that has been promised. Then the terrorists will be abolished, including the militants who claim that the country belongs to them and who want to divide it, as they will be humbled and subdued to make this declaration known. And who was it that made the declaration of the Quran known to God's people so that they would have no legitimate claim? The same Malach, correct? And therefore, just so we know we're on the same page here, same name. Therefore, I will reject them, and I will kick them out, and then I will efface them, annihilating them causing them to disappear at that moment in time. I didn't ask this of God, but he has promised it nevertheless. God does what's right. This is right. Even those that I once had an affinity with that will be estranged, it will not be my doing, but God's. Just as God could never and has never exonerated the religious who chose to rob his beloved son of his dignity, God is not going to forgive or forget those who tried to deny the credibility and responsibility of the one who restored Dod's dignity. Therefore, I will reject them, and I will kick them out. And then I will efface them, annihilating them, causing them to disappear at that moment in time. Now, since the cold voice of Yah is addressing the means to know the Father and Son, to engage in the covenant and answer the invitations, those who wish to benefit from the relationship would be wise to listen carefully and then act upon what they hear. The reason that Yahweh immediately transitions to the Malach messenger and to his rancorous adversaries is because by the very nature of delivering God's message, a messenger is almost universally and vociferously, viciously attacked by the zealots of religion and political parties and the conspiracies that he impugns. Those who wage against and rage against God's call, his voice, will of course outnumber those who listen to him by 1,000,000 to 1. And that being the case, Yahweh wanted his people to know whose side he is on. This also suggests that the final witness speaks to Israel during the latter half of the time of troubles, and that he will have the capacity to abolish terrorists and to humble and subdue God's foes. Yahweh will annihilate those who come to annihilate Jews by speaking through his Malach messenger. It will not be prudent to oppose him. The two worst things a person can do at this time is to promote a religious agenda in opposition to Yahweh's voice and people. And since there is no reason to debate them at this late date, God's choice is to pulverize them. You need to understand the alternative to being a participant in Shabuwah or Teruah. You should not vocally support their gods or speak on behalf of their deities, and you should not serve them. You should not do as they do either. Rather, instead, it will be you who will overthrow them. So then you should break apart and crush their sacred monuments and their holy objects of veneration. Exodus 23:24. Oh, that's outstanding news. I have coveted the opportunity to demolish the Dome of the Rock, for example, and of course Al-Aqsa Mosque, even the Church of the Holy Sepulchre. And it appears that I may get my wish. Kaboom. Therefore, you should work with and serve on behalf of Yahweh, your God. Abad, abad, abad. And he will bless your bread and your water. Furthermore, I will remove his sickness from your midst. Shemoth names, Exodus 23:25. This is Yahweh's version of From the river to the sea, Israel will be free. Fakistinians, of course, and those who have tried to drive Jews into the sea will be banished by what is said next. Then I will set your borders from the Red Sea as far as the Sea of the Philistines, and from the wilderness to the furthest extent of the river. Now, when he says this, the Red Sea to the Sea of the Philistines. The Red Sea is touches the southeastern corner of Israel. The Sea of the Philistines, their backs were up against the Mediterranean. That's a very narrow swath of territory. From the wilderness, which would have been to the desert to the south of Israel, to the furthest extent of the river, and it doesn't name the river, but the river would be the Tigris and Euphrates as they curve up north of Israel and up into Lebanon and Syria, but a very narrow swath that is not too dissimilar from the old location of the tribes. This is not the greater Israel project. Indeed, I will give into your hand the inhabitants who have settled of the land, and you will drive them out and banish them before your presence. Shemoth names Exodus 23:31. Yeah, some of that happened long ago, but not much. And now Israel is buried under an avalanche of Muslims who do not belong. That will not be the case 7 years from now. So the statement that was just made has not yet occurred. And since Yahweh used Ad, which is the maximum extent of something, we would have to begin at the mouth of the Red Sea between the Arabian and Peninsula and Africa on the south, and consider the northern shore of the Mediterranean coast to the north. The wilderness is defined in the Torah, could be at the Nile, but I don't think so. I think it's the wilderness where the children of Israel spent most of their time during the Exodus, which is just south of Israel. And the river, which is not named as the Euphrates, I don't think takes us to the Persian Gulf. But I think the direction here now, since the other two directions were east and west, this would be north and south. So it is likely north of Israel into Syria. Now, these boundaries would certainly be better than what Israel is currently enjoying. The beguiled and beguiling mind of man provides the impetus for religious monuments such as cathedrals and mosques, obelisks to sun gods, like those found in the Vatican and Washington, D.C., idolatrous statues like those erected to Mary as the Mother of God and the Queen of Heaven, and for the pagan religious practices such as Lent, weeping for Tammuz, Christmas, New Year's Day, and Ramadan. To rid the place of them and to rid an area of the disease and suffering they cause, one has to rid the realm of their hosts, religious practitioners. In direct opposition to the means Catholicism has used to assimilate people into the religion, Yahweh said, "You shall not cut an agreement or make stipulations with them or with their gods." And yet that is the very basis now of rabbinic Judaism, of Christianity, and of Islam. Well, so much for negotiating with Christians or Muslims or capitulating to the United Nations. The instruction is for there to be no negotiated settlements. And this means that Yahweh is diametrically opposed to the two-state dissolution, even though it will happen because of Israel's malfeasance. And while rabbis inculcated Greek customs and imams rabbinic traditions, None have been as bold in syncretism as Roman Catholics, who built their religious empire by incorporating the myths and traditions of the Babylonians, Assyrians, Egyptians, Greeks, and Romans. Even the South Americans allegedly to lure pagans into the church by emulating their traditions. These are but a few examples of the putrid pagan pontifications found in the Christian swamp of religious poison. Imperial Rome's and Janus's New Year Day, also known as the Octave of Christians, and the Solemnity of Mary, Mother of God, the Epiphany, St. Valentine's Day, St. Patrick's Day, Lent, Ash Wednesday, Palm Sunday, Easter Sunday, the Feast of the Assumption of the Blessed Virgin Mary, the Nativity of St. John, Halloween, All Saints' Day, the Advent, the Feast of the Immaculate Conception, and Christmas, the Nativity of our Lord. Then there are the borrowed customs of Sunday worship, as the Lord's Day, the Eucharist, communion, and the sacrifice of the Mass, acknowledging saints' prayers to and for the dead, the rosary, priestly confession, purgatory, statues and prayers to the Madonna and Child, the cross sign, the crucifixes, religious relics and icons, halos and steeples, obelisks, holy water, infant baptism, wax candles, justification by works, indulgences, a monetary tithe, and a paid clergy, a clerical hierarchy, and a sovereign pontiff, cardinals, celebrate priests as fathers, monks, nuns, and calling God the Lord. They all have a pagan past. So you'll notice that not one of Yahweh's 7 invitations to be called out and meet with God made the Christian list. And then there is the Babylonian Christmas tree and its lights and decorations, the Babylonian Yule log, wreaths, and Santa, and the Babylonian Easter bunny and dyed eggs, which are part of a hunt, the Babylonian Easter ham and hot cross buns. In direct violation of Yahweh's instructions, rabbis have instituted the pagan celebrations of the Babylonian head of the year called Rosh Hashanah, the fast of Zom Gilead, Rosh Chodesh Iyar, Yom HaAzmut, counting the Omer, Shimchat Torah, Hanukkah, Tu B'Shavat, Tush B'Av, Ashura B'Tevet, the blessings of the month of Tammuz, and Purim, to name but a few extracurricular religious holidays. And it should be noted that on Hebcal, the most popular rabbinical calendar, Matzah, Bikurim, and Teruah aren't even listed. Moreover, Shabuwah is always set on the wrong day, and Pesach and Kippurim dates are routinely moved to keep them from falling on a Muslim or Christian holy day, as they're third in line. God is not politically correct. He is not a proponent of multiculturalism. Tolerance is not a divine virtue. Simply stated, the edicts of the socialist secular humanism, Marxism, are in direct opposition to Yahweh's instructions for a number of important reasons. He said, they should not remain in your land, lest they cause you to miss the way to approach me. This is because if you serve their gods, then indeed it will be an enticing and incapacitating snare for you. And so it has been. The Torah critics are quick to pull statements related to the conquest of the promised land from their context and then declare that the God of the Old Testament is wrathful. They never ponder, even for a moment, the reason that God wanted the religious and the political out of these tribal enclaves within Israel in the 14th century BCE. But simply stated, it was the single most merciful and intelligent thing to do. And with that, we'll conclude what has been an hour and 50 minutes of a basic program, the 7th on Shabuwah. And we'll return to sounding the shofar and to the marvelous instructions of the prophet Yoel in our next program, addressing the celebration of Shabuwah. Thanks for listening.
Hey there, thanks for tuning in. That was Fetch. Gotta run now. Catch y'all on our next podcast.